Welcome to the New Masculine Podcast. This is a place where masculine identifying people come together in community to disrupt outdated models of masculinity and together construct new models for our way forward as men. As a special note, while this conversation is between men, this podcast values all beings and seeks to create positive impacts for all. I'm your host, Travis Stock. I am a master life coach, an equus coach, which means I often partner with horses when supporting clients, and I'm a teacher. In my coaching work, I am passionate about the balance of masculine and feminine energies in each of us, regardless of gender. I seek to help others nurture a relationship with both types of energy, which often leads to a greater sense of wholeness. And yet what I found in my work with men is that many of us have been taught messages about what it means to be a man by first teaching us to avoid anything that is associated with the feminine. That avoidance leads to few experiences of intimacy, emotions outside of anger, vulnerability, or even a sense of belonging. Striving to comply with these models of masculinity has many of us feeling isolated, ashamed, unworthy, afraid, angry, and depressed. That's why I started this podcast, to bring men together who are ready for something new, something more whole. We've had a lot of conversations about what it's like for men who find themselves failing or missing the mark around our cultural ideals of masculinity. But what's it like for men who actually feel right at home and naturally successful at embodying those ideals? Do they feel fear? Do they feel vulnerable? Is life simply easy for them? These are all questions I've pondered and why I'm looking forward to my conversation with my next guest, Chris Marhefka. Chris personally identifies as a son, as a leader, and as a husband. Chris personally identifies as a son, as a leader, and as a husband. He comes from the physical training world, is a successful businessman, and personally owns many of what we might call hypermasculine traits. So life's just been effortless for him, right? Well, I'll actually let him answer that. But what I do know is that his journey involves deep self-discovery around internalized shame and safety that goes beyond just physical safety. Chris is the CEO and facilitator of Training Camp for the Soul, as well as the founder and facilitator of Embodied Man Community and Retreats. A philosophy that guides his work with men is that it's not about us limiting our power. We actually must feel all of it to better understand the responsibility of it. I'm excited to welcome him into the New Masculine as we explore his personal and professional journey and engage each other on how we can continue to improve personal development spaces for men. So let's welcome him in. Thanks for joining me, Chris.
Travis, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Is there anything I haven't shared so far about you that feels important to share up front in our conversation?
I lead a lot about my personal story and where I'm at. That I had a very what I would call traditional conservative upbringing in my life, and so a lot of my ideals and values about what it meant to be a man and embody the masculine was very like what I call old world. It was so I came to be the man that I am today through the hard inner work that I'm sure we'll get into. But I just like to say that I resonate so much with much of what the world sees as men. And because of that, I can see many men that come to work with me. I can see them, I can feel them, I can understand them at a very deep level because I absolutely was them, and I am them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Something I hear in that is as you were talking, you said something about your very conservative upbringing. Conservative has a very interesting sort of connotation right now in our culture. I'd love for you to, just so that we know more about you, understand what you mean by conservative upbringing. Is that religion? Is that politics? Is that a little bit of, what does it mean in your life?
Yeah, great question. You're right. Conservative, I think now just get put in the political realm, but I was speaking just of traditional family values of nuclear family, and it only looks this way. Included in that was definitely religion. I was raised in a Catholic family, went to Catholic school, raised with a very rigid belief system that this is the only way that it is. Everything was very in a box. It was like, this is the way that it is. Anything outside of that is wrong. And this is the way we do things.
Yeah, so what were some of the things that you learned about as a child in that kind of upbringing that were inside the box of what it was to be a man?
First off, men never show weakness. They never express emotions. Emotions are weakness. You don't you don't have emotions. Those aren't for you. um, and men are there to provide, mostly financially. The role of a man is to earn as much money to take care of a family. And anything outside of that comes really second. Also, men are generally closed off. This kind of goes with the emotions, but they're generally closed off. They're very what I think is referred to as stoic, but not the benefits of stoic. Really, like the flat line personality is like you can't experience high highs, you can't show that, you can't experience low lows. You just always have to be there. You always have to be steady. And again, there's gifts in all these, but it left me to living a very very flat-lined life. With that came the nuclear family. It was like you meet a woman. Next step, you get married. Next step, you have kids. You have a house together, and then you live that life forever, for the rest of your life. And there's no other options other than to do that. And I was, in fact, I talked about the Catholic thing. I just got back from a bit of a family reunion / funeral, and I had a realization with 13 grandchildren on the side, and I think about another dozen on the other side of my family. I was the first person to marry a non-Catholic in my family. So first person to not get married in a church. And so I was already the black sheep from that. And then also, I was taught the very straightforward, you get a good education, you do good, you be the good boy, you follow the rules, and then that'll lead to a good job that's high paying so you can provide for the family. And then you just keep climbing that and getting more titles and more achievements to put on your lifetime resume so you can tell people who you are. And like that was the definition of what it meant to be a man. Have as many things on your life resume, have as many material possessions that you've accumulated and toys, and that's how you can prove a good life as a man.
It's so weird how often we as men are taught how to develop a life resume rather than actually being able to given permission to live life, to feel life, to be in life. It's all about the achievements and about that life resume that you're talking about that are some metrics of what potentially success can look like. What did that do to you as a person living in that sort of life resume kind of way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always like to say that every single belief has gifts in it, and every one of those beliefs has a limiting factor to it. It has a shadow to it, and for me, it led to me working really hard at everything I put my mind to. And for a while, that was sports. I did really well as a competitive athlete for a lot of my life, and then that led to school. Did really well there, worked hard at that, and then did really well at business and entrepreneurship. And it was just this, I would put my head down for periods of time, just work, and I call it grind. I would just grind and put everything else aside, put away my feelings, how my body was, my relationships. I would just put my head down. And occasionally I would pick my head up just enough to set the next goal to put my head back down towards. And that was the process of my life for the first 30 years of it.
What changed? What happened after the first 30 years?
It was actually at my 30th birthday. I'm born in December. And so it was always the right time to like set new goals for the next year. And I had been setting goals since, I can really remember, since I was like a teenager, and then really seriously after I graduated college. And every year I would do it right around my birthday in December. And on my 30th birthday, I remember sitting down to do it. And I look back at my spreadsheets of all my goals in the past and career goals and financial goals and relationship goals and body health goals. And I would look back and all the boxes were checked. I was hitting all of them. I was doing it. I was getting the achievements. And I remember sitting down at 30 and thinking, wow, is this it? Am I just going to keep doing this process every year for the rest of my life, keep checking the boxes? And after I looked back at all the boxes I checked, I was like, wow, it actually doesn't feel as good as I thought it would feel. So what's the problem? Because I've achieved all of these things. At that point in my life, I was married. I had the house. I had built a few successful businesses, and I had built a community. I had friends that I loved. Well, I didn't call it love at the time. I had friends that I got along with and had fun times with. And I had hit financial goals that I thought it would take a whole lifetime for me to hit by the time I was 30. And, I was like, okay, so is the answer just more? Do I just add more challenge to this? Do I get better? And it was this moment of both confusion and also frustration. I was confused because I was like, okay, I have the life that most people outwardly looking in would say, oh, this is a great life. You've checked all the boxes. You've climbed this ladder and you're doing well on the life resume. So that was the confusion because I wasn't really happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And then the frustration followed that because it was like, okay, so if that isn't the answer, what is the answer? And that led to like, okay, like what next then? What now?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing in all of that is that while you felt very at home and felt some ease around checking the boxes and being able to create that life resume and to live in that very certain contained box of masculinity that you were taught growing up, there still was something missing.
Yeah. And what I say today is that what was missing was me. Authentic me that was underneath all of those labels and all of those achievements and all of those checked boxes. What was actually there? And at that moment, and maybe not at that moment, but soon after, I started to realize that those achievements and labels were actually what was covering up and not allowing me to go into who the me was underneath of that, who the true authentic self was. And that was really scary because I did get really good at checking the boxes. I got really good at getting the next label and the next achievement. And that actually felt easier for me to do than to look inside.
Yeah, I was really struck by when you talked about the cultural conditioning around more. This idea that both capitalism teaches us to be a part of, but just many Western cultures do sort of prescribe to this idea of more, that it's constantly about adding. And the more can often block us from our awareness of self, from actually tending to the being. I love that you said that what was missing was me. That it wasn't about out there getting anything more or achieving more or adding to the life resume. It was actually finding that inner bit.
Yeah, and it was almost like I started to resent all of those things because they didn't get me where I authentically wanted to be, where I could actually enjoy life, where I could be fulfilled with all these achievements, where I could actually celebrate them. The pattern for me was just work hard and put everything else aside to get the thing, like we talked about earlier. But there was no end to it. there was no, the end was like, okay, some imaginary retirement number. When you have enough number of dollars saved up, you get to enjoy life. But when I really looked at that, all the models that I saw weren't actually enjoying their life at that magic number, at that magic age. They were still suffering. And so I was like, okay, well, that's not it then. And that, it led to me to start resenting and questioning a lot about my life and how I was living.
Yeah. So tell us more about what that next phase was as you hit that resentment, as you recognize the limitations of the models that had been given to you, and that recognizing that others were successfully living in those and not fulfilled and happy. What was the next phase for you?
Yeah, I spent a good 2 years unconsciously burning some of those things to the ground. And at the time, I didn't know that's what I was doing, but looking back, it's very clearly when the resentment started to build, I just started to separate myself from those things that were causing the resentment. So I started to separate myself from my businesses, and I started to check out of them mentally, physically, emotionally. I started to check out. I don't think I was ever truly checked into my relationship, like really present with it, but I separated even more from it. It was just another box to be checked. We had dinner together. We did the occasional sex. We went on an occasional trip together, and we talked and we had fun. We did some social interactions, but I just started to. It was as if I wanted something more. I didn't know what that more was, because the more that I was going after wasn't it. I didn't have a model. I didn't have an answer for it. So I was starting to eliminate the things that that had brought me to this point of confusion and resentment. And it led me to make some bad financial decisions, investing in some things that really shouldn't have, getting into a lot of debt. So I was, by the time I started doing this deep inner work, I was about $600,000 in debt. So over $500,000 in debt. And I was ended up, as I said, I checked out of my business, but at the same time, I was still, I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I was trying to scale my business from a really purely egotistical standpoint. And so on one point, like, I resented it, and I didn't want to go into the office, and I didn't wake up excited. I woke up like really lethargic and with no energy to do anything. So for that period of those 2 years, like, I was living in both worlds. I was trying to be the old me and keep achieving, while still internally it was eating me up inside. And so, like, again, unconsciously, like, I was just like saying, like, can we curse on here?
Yeah, go for it.
Internally, I was like, fuck it. I was like, fuck all of this. But I didn't have enough courage to truly say fuck it and really look at it. So I was trying to do both. I was saying fuck it unconsciously while still trying to play in that world for 2 years. And so that 2 years was really, really uncomfortable for me, because my heart was saying, like, it's time to move on. It's time to do something else. It's time to find out really who you are. But my mind was saying, no, but we got to do it this way. And there's just like a lot of internal conflict. And during that time, from 30 to 32 years old, I had like countless unexplainable injuries. I was constantly injured physically. I was constantly tired. I was always like sick and dragging myself into things. I had no excitement for life during that whole 2-year period. And it got to the point to where, and I'm sure we'll get into this, like, the real breaking point was when my body just finally said, like, it hit me with the big lesson. It was like, no, you're done. You're going to sit down. My mind just was like, okay, you're done. It's time to surrender. And emotionally, finally, all that pressure that was building up over my whole life finally burst out. And that was the moment where, like, everything broke, and I was like, okay, let's really do something now.
It's really interesting. Here on The New Masculine, we dabble a little in the sort of astrology world, and you're talking about that 30 to 32-year-old phase, and that feels very much like the Saturn's return time. And whether you get into that kind of archetypal storytelling and symbolism that is evolved in astrology, just purely from a developmental standpoint, that journey into our 30s is different than our 20s. In some ways, I think they say in the US currently the adolescence is now extended all the way until 28-ish. That even when we're done with college and out there in the world, we're still playing in both the child space and the adult space. We're not fully landed in it yet. And that I think it's common for many of us to really like get our butts whooped when when we hit that 30-year-old phase where we're like, oh man, I really have to do this. I don't have mommy and daddy to fall back on. I actually have to be this next iteration of myself. I have to expand into more than what I've been.
Yeah, it's so true, and I was acting like childish in a lot of ways in those things and immature, and it was finally recognizing that I was the one that had the responsibility to create life going forward, and it wasn't about just like playing around anymore. It wasn't about just following the old scripts and the old things that were told to me. It was like finally time for me to say, okay, this is actually my life. And I'd tried a lot of things. I'd done a lot of things. I'd adventured. I'd tested the business world, and I had a lot of great lessons in there. But it was like this moment where it was like, okay, and now what? And now what are you going to take all that from that adolescent and from your 20s, and what are you going to make of it? Like, who are you actually going to be?
Yeah, so let's talk more about what that you hit that sort of dark night of the soul, that place where it really kind of caved in on you. What was that like, and how did you start to find your way through it?
Yeah, it was, for me, it happened in November 2019. No, I'm sorry, 2018. And it was leading up to that, I started to, like I said, I was gradually like separating myself from like the old version of myself. I started to physically leave more. I started to travel more. I bought an RV and we're taking a couple smaller trips. And my wife at the time and I had this like lifelong vision of traveling the country in the RV and taking 6 months off and doing this. And we were just coming back from a shorter trip. It was a trip up to the mountains in North Carolina and Tennessee, and I was driving back across the Florida-Georgia border to go back home. And there was this moment that hit me where, again, the body was broken, the mind was just tired, and emotionally, I realized that I didn't want to go back to all that I had created. It was that final breaking point where I was like, okay, I really have to set all of these things down. I really have to finally look at it. I can't walk in both worlds. I've been walking both worlds for 2 years, and I was like, I can't do this. And I broke down, crying, driving, and I had to pull over. And my wife at the time, she just held space for me for 20, 30, 40 minutes while I cried and just expressed. And at this point in time, this was, I give her so much credit because this was a shock to her. I had put on the mask of I was doing good. Every time someone asked, I'm like, I'm good. That was always my answer. And so to everyone else, I was good. But finally in this moment, like I let out a lot of this, that I had been holding on to, that I wasn't happy, that I wasn't fulfilled, that I didn't know where I was going, that I was scared. I was scared that I didn't know what was next. I was in shame about the failing at the recent business decisions and getting into debt, and like this all came out at once. And like I said, at that point in time, I'd never expressed any of this to her, but she held space for it. And on the other side of that release, that really cathartic release, for the first time in a really long time, I felt light. I felt energy. I felt like excited. I didn't know what I was excited about, but I was excited about life, just something. And it was a moment where I felt some possibility of everything's going to be okay. And up until that point, like I was in the state of like, even though I was saying I was good, I believe that like things were going to worst case scenario. Like things were not going to be okay. Like all the worst case scenarios were in my head, and that's what I was circling. But there was that moment, And after the release, I was like, oh, actually, I think everything's gonna be okay. I don't know the answer. I don't know what I'm gonna do next, but it was that moment where I actually admitted. I said to her that I'm scared. I don't know what to do next, and I'm finally open to being supported, like truly supported. I'm open to help. Like, please, somebody help me because I don't know what's next. That was the first time in my life where I really opened up to that.
Wow. I'm really glad you're sharing this. I appreciate the vulnerability around that because it's where the common humanity exists between you and I, or between us as men as we connect with each other, is that we may have very different life experiences, but what is at the core for many of us that we're all chasing is to not feel afraid and to not feel ashamed. And those are common threads that exist in both yours and my life. As I'm listening to you, I feel that common humanity with you of like, the details might be a little different, but we both felt a lot of fear and we both felt a lot of shame based on what we were trying to model ourselves after, based on what we were trying to put the mask on and demonstrate so that we could succeed in this world, or we could be worthy, or we could belong to the culture that we were given. And yet we've both run into that place where we hit the limit of what we could do and still survive, basically.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate the vulnerability of that, because it's what I was sort of alluding to as I opened this conversation, is like, it could be really easy for to assume that someone like you, who does sort of lean towards more of the masculine style, that does have many of the markers of success that are out there for our culture as a man, that you might not feel those things. And then I'm like, well, how do I connect with this man? Because I feel all of these things, and obviously he has none of them. But you sharing that a lot, it creates space for connection.
Yeah, thank you for naming that, because I think myself, for all that time, and so many people that were just like me, some of my best friends and people that I coach today, like I see it. And I see them trying to be this mask so hard, and really trying to be so hard, like working so hard at being this version of themselves that they're either suppressing or distracting, or just not really able yet to feel really what's underneath. And I truthfully, I made it look easy. I did. And I think that was part of the thing that was eating me up internally, was that I'm, to everyone else, like, my life is good and it is easy, but it wasn't. It wasn't. And I see that for so many people as well. And so, if nothing else, I hope this gives people permission to share, like, to someone, what is inside, and not just what you're projecting outwards for people to see about you, but like what's really in there. And just knowing that everyone has their own breaking point, theoretical dark night of the soul. You I guess don't have to get to your worst case scenario. And had I shared earlier, at least to my wife or to people like my manager, my business, that like I was, like, a lot of these things could have been resolved had I just opened up a little bit and let someone in just a little bit to be like, hey, this is what's going on for me. But instead, it was confusing for me. And so I know it was confusing for everyone else in my life.
Well, yeah, and I think it sounds really obvious that you shouldn't have had to go that far, but that's just as part of the man box that we put ourselves in, is that we have to endure a lot. And that, as you said, you hadn't been open to help or support or any of that stuff. And so on the other side of it, it's like, well, duh, I could have avoided a lot of that. And there were people to support me, but to admit that while still in that box is, I have failed at this box.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess I keep, as the more and more conversations I have with men, the more and more I recognize that each one of us fails at that man box at some point. Yeah. And we spend a lot of our life trying not to fail, or trying not to let other people see that we fail it. But we're all doing that. We're all failing at it. Because it's outside of ourselves. It's not authentic to who we are. It mistakes, success success markers for fulfillment and of true beingness and an awareness of self. And I think that there's a challenge in there for us as men is if we keep mistaking those measurements of success as us, then we never, I don't know how we address the current challenges that we're all navigating as men in this world and that all people are navigating because of some of the harmful effects of manhood, masculinity, patriarchal societies, that kind of stuff. I don't know how we address that until we can actually start to recognize that there's a being in here.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is that beingness isn't as measurable as the doingness.
Mm-hmm.
And the doing has we've come up with plenty of scoreboards to live our life from the achievement standpoint, but there's really not that many of like how to measure you being your authentic self, because it's really different for everyone. But you know what? You can absolutely feel it when you are in the presence of someone who is being their authentic self and they've gone there. Like, you can feel it, and it's just not as tangible as like, I've got this much in my bank account, I've got this many possessions, I've got this many labels on my business card. So I think that's part of the challenge, and that in itself is just like a masculine thought process of like, we have to measure to know that we're successful in this life. We really don't.
Yeah. I mean, our whole lives are set up to train our brains to think in that way. Our school system is very much like that. Anything like Industrial Revolution forward teaches us that it's like about efficiency, productivity, and all these measurement pieces that someone outside can decide on our worth and value. And how do we now start to turn those metrics inward and actually define those for ourselves? Because we can still lean into the achievement side of the masculinity. We can still set goals for ourselves. We can still really own the gold that's in that, but just doing it in a much more balanced, healthy, fulfilling way.
Yeah, and those, I love that you brought that up, because there's so much value in that energy, but it has to come from a place, or it should come from a place of like, this is actually what I want to be doing. So just because I can get better at it and more efficient at it doesn't mean I should be doing this. And so I've actually gotten to a stage in my development recently in the last year where I've been bringing back in a lot of that masculine energy, and I've started setting goals again. I completely set it aside. When I put that part of my life aside, I set aside setting goals. I set aside working hard. I set aside like training hard, like physically. What else did I set aside? I set aside a lot of structure in my life, a lot of scheduling. I used to schedule like every minute in my calendar, and I like put a lot of that aside. And I've been bringing it back in because I know how useful it is, and I feel that I'm doing it from a healthy place now. So I'm bringing goals back in, bringing more structure in my day back in, training again, lifting weights again, and feeling really good about those things.
Yeah, you mentioned during sort of your breaking point that the two major things that you felt were lack of safety and shame. How did you start to recreate a sense of safety? Or how did you help start undoing some of the shame you had from the past?
It started in a program, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but it's a program that I run now. But it's called Training Camp for the Soul. And, it had just come in my awareness, 6 months before that dark night of the soul moment for me. And I resisted it. But my wife at the time, she did the program, and I noticed all of the changes that she was experiencing. She was happier. She was lighter. She was more fulfillment with life. And I wanted that. And so that program, it just was in my awareness, and I ended up doing it just 2 months later after that dark night of the soul moment, because it was the moment when I finally realized, like, okay, I'm open to someone actually supporting me. And in that program, like, one of the first things that we opened up with was like a shame circle, whereas like, if there's anything that you want to share that like you've been holding on to, it's just a safe space to do so. And the first week, I think I shared something really, it was really surface, but I hadn't really shared with anyone. And then every week, I found myself sharing just a little bit more and like really trusting this person that was leading the container and then trusting the other people that were in the group. I was like, okay, all right, if they could handle that, and they respond, like, they didn't respond with like rejecting me. They didn't respond with judging me. They actually responded with love. And in me sharing, I actually felt more connected to them. I was like, okay, so maybe I'll share a little bit more. So it wasn't like it wasn't binary for me. It was more incremental. I would share a little bit more, and I was at the same time I was doing the same thing with the people in my business life, my employees, and I was doing the same thing with my my family, my parents. And I was doing the same thing with my partner, my wife, and every single time I shared a little bit more, I realized like, okay, that was a little uncomfortable to do at first, but that actually was easier than I thought, and I feel more connected. I feel lighter. I'm not carrying that anymore. And so I just practiced that little bit at a time. And also there were a lot of embodiment practices that help with safety too. I'm very attracted to what's commonly referred to as breath work, but just like intentional breathing. So I've studied that for many years. And just the way that slowing down our breath can slow down our nervous system enough to be okay with all these sensations that are happening, and the nervousness, the shame, the anxiety, the whatever we want to label it, that is coming up as a result of thinking about sharing this. I can slow it down, and I can breathe into that, and no matter how afraid I am to share it, I'm building the muscle of sharing vulnerably, and I'm building the muscle of safety. And so it was like, slow down, okay, I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but I do it. And then, okay, great result. And then that's more evidence for the next time. Slow it down, breathe, deep into my belly. Okay, I can do this. And then enough courage to share that next thing. And it just keeps building to the point to where now, I feel so vulnerable that, like, whether it be a podcast forum or a safe container in our groups and our programs, or in my relationships, like, I'm sharing like fully what's there almost at all times. But that didn't come from just flipping a switch. It came from just like incremental testing the waters. Because I really thought that there was things that I shared that was like, oh, if I share this, they're going to hate me. They're going to judge me. They're going to resent me. They're going to withdraw any good things that they thought about me. And that was so fearful for me. But it was always the opposite.
Yeah, I think that that's what keeps so many of us locked in our old patterns, is because in order to do it differently, we have to risk that feeling that we will no longer belong, or that people will remove their love from us. And so I think that we do have to take some calculated risks. We do have to sort of test the water, get our foot in, and see how it goes, and gain a little bit more evidence over and over again that we can trust that faith. Something I've talked to you previously about is that you have been involved in self-help personal development kind of work for a while. What was different about going through the training camp for the soul versus what you were doing previously? Why did it make such a difference?
Yeah, the way that I describe it simply is that for 10 years, I was doing personal development in my mind to get better at things. So I was reading the book and doing the course to become a better marketer, a better leader, a better communicator. I was always thinking my way linearly. Okay, if I do this action, I'll get better at this thing. If I put this habit in place, I'll get better. And so it was always this like controlled development where I was always in control of like doing this thing, and I know this is going to be the outcome.
What a masculine approach.
yeah, and it works. It works for a period of time. It worked for it. It does work. It does. But again, it's like do I actually want to be improving this thing that I'm working at? Like, do I want to be doing this? And yeah, such a masculine approach. It was like defined all of my life. It was very, very controlled. And so what was different about this was that it was actually, we limited the talking. We limited the stories that we were telling about all this feeling, and we just got into the body. We got out of the head, we got into the body, and it was like, no, it was like very compassionately. It was like, no, I don't need to hear what story you're making of this. Just tell me objectively what you're feeling. It was like, oh, interesting. That's different. And so it was a lot of priming safety. A lot of the practices, like I said, were practices in our body. And it was slowing down the breath, and it was tracking energy, and it was tracking emotions, just energy and motion, and it was just like saying objectively what was there. And also there was in it was a lot of inner child work from the standpoint of identifying and unlearning things that were limiting me in my life. And so there's like a process that we take people through where you just identify some limiting beliefs. And they were very, like, as soon as I like dropped into those meditations and where I was hearing them, I was like, yep, that's it. I knew it right away. And I was living so strongly from them. And so, they were the things that I had formed my identity around. And so I wasn't ready to look at them before, but in this safe container where I was like, oh, they don't actually care about the story. They don't care about the mask. They don't care about the me outside of this call. They just care about what's happening right now with me. And so, yeah, it was the first time where I felt like someone was really, I had never shared, so I never really thought anyone was listening to me. But it was the first time I thought I've actually felt listened to, I felt seen, and I felt truly safe. That was the first time I really felt safe. And that in itself, without all the frameworks, without all the like structure to that program, that in itself would have been life-changing for me. To just be able to share vulnerably, to feel my feelings for the first time without judging them or making a story about them, which is what I got used to doing. For me, it was just, it was usually suppressing. If something would come up, like, nope, that's not useful, put it back down. That's not useful for my achievement mind, so I'm not going to look at that. This was the opposite. It was like, no, allow that to come up. Allow that to be expressed. And there was so much ease to that. Like when things come up, just allowing them to come up. And on the other side of that, like, that was actually not that bad. It was really easy and I feel great. Whereas it took, for so much of my life, it took so much energy to quote unquote control my emotions, really suppress my emotions, but it took so much energy to like press them down all the time so that I could keep living my achievement world. But it felt easy.
I love, as you're sharing this, what comes to mind for me is thinking about my own journey of coming out and just owning my authentic self as a gay man. That so much of my energy was used around trying to suppress that, trying to control that, trying to not let that come up. And so I love hearing in your story that you had your own coming outs to do. And I think that that's something I like to always say to people is the gay community does not have that we do not, or they're the only ones that have coming out processes. We don't have a monopoly on coming out. We all have to do coming out processes throughout our lives of sharing what's true, what's really there, rather than the manufactured thing we've learned to show. And it's scary. That identity kind of work is really scary because we've learned to cope and stay safe, quote unquote, in the world with that identity. And in order to dissolve that, you have to risk feeling unsafe. And who wants to feel unsafe?
I love that you named that because that's actually one of the practices that I use when I coach is outing conversations. Because oftentimes we do this development work and we try to like brush under the rug like all the old self stuff, but it never works. Like we just kind of get magnetized back to it in like our external world, in our external relationships. So you could be changing inside, but if everything else around you, if you're not actually naming and outing yourself for being a certain way, nothing outside of yourself really changes. And so what I encourage people to do is like have those outing conversations like, hey, I used to act this way. I used to be this way. I used to do this thing. And my intention is to shift that. This is who I want to be now. And this is who I'm going to show up as now. And this is my ask. This is what I want from you in that, support in that. And it's scary for people to do that because you're literally naming the identity that you were that you're no longer identifying with. So it's almost like a retirement of it or a death of it. And that's really scary, but it's so successful because what it does is, on one side, it will engage the people that you really want in your life to be there for you, to support you, to like be on board with you being the new you. So your life is actually easier around them rather than trying to play this game of pretend. Or if that person rejects you for that, that's a good thing too, because now you get to limit the time you spend with them because time with them is probably going to get increasingly harder because you're becoming a new person and they're rejecting that. And so having those outing conversations is really, really valuable.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think something that's often missed in personal development work is that you can do some of the work by yourself. Internally, you can free yourself from certain limiting beliefs. In a silo, you can do some of the work. But we're social beings, and we are engaged in systems and families that are used to us being a certain way. And those systems will keep us locked into them unless we start asking the system to change with us or to at least free us to change and evolve with us in some way. That it's sort of like most of the ways that we learn to control ourselves and the identities that we created were created as a result of our relationships with people. And so therefore the relationships have to shift and evolve too. They can't stay the same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's why it's so important oftentimes for people to hire a coach rather than necessarily just reading from a book, some personal development thing, because we need the accountability. We need the practice space to be able to have those outing conversations, to share what comes up for us in a safe space so that then we can go do it out in our outside world and actually make real change rather than just continuing to do thought work or perspective shifting in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm glad you said that. That actually reminded me that was the other thing that was different for me for 10 years of personal development. I was the podcast guy. I was the reading a book guy. And I had a few business coaches, but that was the first coach that really was there for like me and my development. And, that was something really different for me.
When you hired a coach, what were the barriers to entry for you of going to that? Because it's something I'm really fascinated about when working with other men. There are barriers to entry for men to ask for help, to receive support, to get a coach, a therapist. There are for sure barriers of entry. What were they for you, and how did you kind of get over that hurdle?
First one was definitely trust. I had a lot of belief systems that led me to not trust other people.
Yeah.
Not trust them fully. Trust them very surface, but not fully. And so I always believed that I was like the smartest, most capable person in the room. And so how could I possibly trust me to someone else? That was the old belief. And
wow, that's quite a belief system that'll keep you locked into some things.
So locked, yeah. And it led me to be very locked. But so trust. And what was needed for me was I needed to see, like, a phone call wasn't enough, a discovery call wasn't enough, and a referral from someone wasn't enough. Because that's what happened with this program. I got a referral, and I loved how this person was showing up, but still I didn't really know them that well. So I was like, okay, cool, they worked for them. And then the phone call wasn't enough. But then when I witnessed my wife, my ex-wife, wife at the time, when she went through the program, Like I like really saw it and felt it. And so the trust with this person in this program was enough for me to take the leap. The second thing, which I guess goes with trust, was what am I going to actually get out of this? Tell me what the ROI is, because that's what my mind was.
I need a measurement of success that I can achieve. Give me the return on investment.
Exactly. And frankly, she really couldn't give me one, and I had to get okay with that uncertainty. But that was exactly what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something I watch a lot of my male clients doing, of like, but what am I going to get out of this? How am I going to know that this is successful? And I keep trying to help remind them that this is a redefining of what success is, that is much more internally referenced than externally referenced. And so if I give you those measurements of success, we're just repeating the same pattern. We're still re-entrenching the same thing that got you to where you're at. And that's unsatisfying in the beginning for a lot of men, because when you've been trained to think in a certain way your whole life, how do you completely switch that around right up front? So I think there is some sort of surrender faith piece that you kind of have to try it for a little while first before you understand the concept, or before your mind really gets how to measure that.
Yeah, and going even further, like, if you and I, Travis, said it for someone else, it's ours. We're reinforcing that. But even if they said it from the place that they're at today, like, I could not imagine, like, if you gave me a week in a cabin in the mountains, I could not have drawn up the life that I have today. My imagination couldn't get there based on my old ways of thinking. And so even the intentions that I set for that program, when I look back on them, they're like so silly and surface. That like, that is like all I could get to, though, at that stage of where I was at, was just more linear cognitive thinking. So it sucks to say, but like, it's even hard to say what the outcome will be in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years of your life, because neither one of us can really paint that picture right now. Because the moment you take one step forward, the next step is going to be clear.
Yeah.
It's really hard to see, if you're really open, it's hard to see 10 steps forward if you're in this place of transition. And that's where, when you start pulling layers away, you start removing these things, you're like, oh, well, shit, I thought I wanted that. Like, let's just take that off the table, because that's really not important at all. That was a part of this layer and this belief that actually doesn't resonate anymore. And so sometimes we'll set 10 steps later and we're like, oh, that's actually not the thing at all. So, like, that's the other thing I talk about in integration, is like just taking the obvious step, the one obvious step right now. And maybe you have to repeat that step 100 times, but like, just take the step that's obvious, have the conversation that's obvious, take the action that's obvious, and immediately. But don't get stuck in the future casting of like, what is my life going to look like 10 years from now as a result of doing this? Because it's all made up anyway.
It's all made up anyways. I feel the truth of that so strongly. It's what I say to many of my clients oftentimes, that if you're looking for one of those like business coaches that can help you set goals and achieve them, I'm probably not the right coach for you, because my goal is to actually take those external measurements of success away, get you in right relationship with yourself, and then see what you create from there. The creative process is brilliant. I don't want to take that away from you, but let's actually do the inner work that helps the creation process come from a more authentic place, rather than still reaching for something and still trying to soothe or numb or do something with it. Like, let's get in right relationship with yourself. And I love what you were talking about the goal, the life that you have now. You could never have really scripted it if you had tried. The best things about my life currently are things that I would never have scripted. The work I do with horses, living in Seattle, Washington, like these were not on the radar. running my own business. Those are not on the radar at all. And it's come from taking the step in front of me, saying yes to one thing, not knowing where it was leading, and continuing to build on it, continuing to get my footing underneath me and go, okay, well, where's the next step? Okay, well, where's the next step? So thank you for putting that, because I feel the truth in that. And it so aligns with my philosophy. The coaching practice that I offer, the work that I do with people, is to take those measurements of success away and actually just start to get you back into this relationship with yourself.
And it's scary, but the truth is you can always go back to the measurements if you want.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think someone said that to me early on in my development journey. Like, if you really want, you can always go back to like all of that.
Feel free to feel unfulfilled and we're having a life resume. Have it. You can have that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So you talked about going through this program as a client, as somebody that had signed up for it. Now you're in the CEO and facilitator role. Tell me more about how that transition's been and what you're doing now with this program.
Being open to the unknown is the short answer. Surrendering, for sure. So I did that program, and immediately after it, I made the decision that I was going to take that like lifetime goal road trip that I mentioned earlier in this RV that I bought. And so we hit the road right after that. And that was part of my integration, was I needed to separate myself physically from the life that I had created. Mostly like business. Business was my life. Like my work was my life. And so like just about everything was around that. And I knew that I couldn't keep working 80, 100-hour work weeks for another year, let alone the rest of my life. And so I was like, I have to start enjoying life now. And it was a have to for me. It wasn't even like a want. It was like, I have to start doing this as a result of doing this program. And so I took off on that road trip, and I actually got invited to help out at one of the next retreats that she was hosting. She did this. I did the virtual program, but she was also hosting these like small in-person retreats. And I said yes, and I went to just help out as a volunteer. I ran a food company, and so I helped out in the kitchen, and I'm pretty good in the kitchen as a chef. And so I just cooked meals for like 10 people at the retreat. And it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Witnessing the virtual was very powerful. What I did was powerful, but seeing it in person and witnessing people and being in this cabin for 6 days, it was life changing to experience it just from the outside looking in, from the kitchen looking in. And apparently I did a really good job. She invited me back to the next one, and then another one after that. So I volunteered 3 times just at these retreats, and at this point, like I was a CEO of 2 companies. I was a partner in 3, or an owner or partner in 3. I was like running huge businesses, but here I was volunteering in the kitchen, taking a week off to volunteer in the kitchen at this retreat because it just called me. Like it was like, yes, I absolutely have to go back. I'm definitely going back. And it was either on the second time or the third time. I started getting kitchen duties done, and I would kind of like ease my way very quietly into the room where the facilitating was happening, and I would just be there and hold space. And I never said anything, but there was a few really powerful moments where either I would like eye gaze with someone, or I would just give them like a really big hug after they came out of a session. And there was just something that, presence, like the gift of presence that I was bringing in those moments, like the whole room could feel it. And I didn't have any, like cognitive training in this work, whereas the founder had been doing this for many, many years. I didn't have any cognitive training, but I knew the framework from doing it myself and from now witnessing it many times. And so I just started mentoring under her. And I started, rather than being in the kitchen, I started just kind of sitting beside her as she was facilitate and learning. We would go for 12 to 14 hours straight with like breaks for meals, but like that was it. These were like intensive retreats. And we would just facilitate all day long, and I would get to the end of the day and I would be energized. And that was a different experience for me because I'd worked plenty of 12 to 14 hour days, but I was always drained and never excited to go back. Yes, I was excited. I was excited to wake up. I was excited to do the next thing. And then after doing that many, many times, she asked me to help her co-facilitate with her. And then through hundreds and hundreds of reps of just like putting in the time, putting in the hours, and working with different people, it was just very clear, like, this is a gift. This is a gift that I'm here to give. And the whole time I was doing that, I was also just using a lot of the gifts I'd developed over 10 years as an entrepreneur. She was just a soulpreneur, and the business was chaotic. Like, that's an understatement. It wasn't a business, and there were no systems. There was no nothing. And so I just started putting a little bit of that, those gifts from entrepreneur life, started putting those in place and helping her out on the business side. And she's like, wow, not only like should you be facilitating with me, like you should be running this like from the business side. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then shortly after we decided to go in as partners, and just a lot of, and this was after I had already decided to sell my businesses. This wasn't like, this happened and then I decided to like leave my life behind or my old life. I had to go into the unknown. And this is what showed up in the unknown for me. And it was very aligned, and it was a full body yes. But I was in a few months where I was like, I don't know what's next for me. I wasn't working. I had sold my businesses, and I was like, I don't really know what's next. And that was uncomfortable for me. And I was uncomfortable for that masculine part that was like, okay, gotta get a job, gotta do the thing, I just had to be in that. But yeah, that came out of that, and that's been great ever since.
It's such an important moment in life when we're in that unknown. A teacher once shared with me the metaphor of like a trapeze artist. The trapeze artist lets go, like leaps off the platform, is holding on to one bar, and in order to grab onto the other bar, at some point you have to let go of the first bar and not know that you're going to make it. And if you don't let go, then you're going to swing backwards. And so there will be a space of time where you're not connected or holding on to either bar. You're no longer the CEO of that company. You're no longer running that business. You're in the unknown. It's terrifying. The ego hates it. The mind will create a lot of stories in it. It's also, in my personal experience, where all the magic of life exists, because things do rise up to catch you. The bar does show up that you grab onto. And so being willing to sometimes let go of the old bar before you can grab onto the new bar it's where the most magic has happened in my life. And those unscriptable things have come into my life.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm gonna steal that if that's okay with you. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll send you, I have something called The Parable of the Trapeze, and it's a sort of poem about it. I'll send it to you.
I love that.
So if somebody was hearing this episode and hearing you talk about this program that you lead and facilitate, what might they expect if they came to it?
Radical safety, radical acceptance, an opportunity to rewrite the entire story of your life. And I say opportunity because people go as far as they're ready to, and I went as far as I was ready to in the program, but it will give someone the tools for life to be with anything that life throws at them. So, like, something happens in my world today that's a trigger, or I get emotional. I have the tools to be with that thing and not let it control me, not let it run the show, because I'm either rejecting it or suppressing it or whatever, creating a story about it. And so those tools everyone learns in our program. We have two two I guess you call them like pet names for our program. It's emotional Navy SEAL training, or some of our clients call it feelings class. They just teach people how to feel. Yeah, so either way, there's the feminine feeling class or the masculine.
I was going to say, that's a good way to describe it because it attracts both people that connect to the feminine or the masculine. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. But it does that. And it gives people, an opening, gives them space to create the new. Our program is entirely about getting all the not self out, clearing all the layers, clearing all the old stuff that's not you, that you were just given or you learned, so that you can be in that creation process. Again, we don't really coach anyone on what's next. We're just like, what's next for you now on the other side of this? That's a really important distinction is, we're never, if it were advice, you're just following my script now. But that's not what we do. And so it opens the door for people to, again, masculine word, control. Take control of your life. Really gain control of your life. And really start living your life. In whatever way that means for them, for you. Because it's different for everyone. But if you're following someone's script, you're in their story. You're in their measurements, and so you give people that opportunity.
It's so funny because following other people's scripts often feels safer to most of us. We're looking for someone to just tell us what to do and what it is. I see that often is why people are attracted to religion or different spiritual teachers or different books, is that we're all looking for someone to just give us the answer. We kind of still really want an adult figure in our life, that parent figure, to just say, here's how to be successful, here's how to be okay, here's how to feel all right. And it's been a huge journey for me of learning how to internalize that sense, to script it for myself, to no longer keep reaching for scripts outside of myself. And I don't always succeed at it. I fail at it sometimes too, still. And I learn from those moments. But it is such an important task of all of us as we find our way through this thing that is being human and living as a spirit and as a body and navigating it all. My understanding of this program is that it's for people of all gender expression, gender identity. Do you do any work that is specifically tailored to masculine identifying or male identifying people?
Yeah, definitely. So as a part of this program, we also do in our retreats, we do breakouts for male identifying and female identifying, and we talk about things and we go into things that are more specific to just that. So within the program, we do that, and then we also host monthly men's circle and women's circle as well. So within the after people graduate from the program, when they're in our integration group, we just do weekly calls, and one of those weekly calls is these men's and women's circles. So we do that. In addition to that, outside of Training Camp for the Soul, I personally run some men's leadership retreats, the Embodied Man ones. And that was just, to be honest, it's not even a business. It was a very loud call from the universe. And I run those primarily like invite only, and that's only not to be exclusive. It's because I like people that are already through the first hump of their personal development is the best way to put it. Like if they're not, I'll refer them to Training Camp for the Soul, like immediately, and be like, hey, this is first step, do this, and then come to one of the men's retreats. And in those men's retreats, we talk about everything from purpose, responsibility, leadership, relationships, sexuality, and really any challenge of a developing male or male identifying person. It actually came, that call came loud and clear during the very, very early days of quarantine, lockdown, whatever we want to call it, when there was a lot of men that were reaching out to me that were in a lot of fear about how they were showing up publicly or in their businesses or in their life. There's just a lot of fear happening in the world. And the word that came to me was, I was in a place to where I was feeling really solid in myself. And the word that came to me was permission. Like, okay, it's time for you to give this permission to other men to be their authentic selves. And that's just what came out of it. And so I do those about twice a year. Yeah.
If you were going to sort of encapsulate a piece of advice for men based on all your own personal experience, on all your facilitation experience, what would you say is that one piece of advice you'd like to leave men with who might be listening to this episode?
Love that. And I think it's the most impactful, but also the most immediate and the easiest to implement right now. And that's to slow down, and to breathe, to literally and figuratively slow down the pace of your speech, slow down how fast you're moving your body, slow down the pace of your schedule, slow down your life enough to see what's really happening. And with that is the breath. Slow down the breath that brings the nervous system down. When you do that, you can start to see things clearly, which at least brings you to awareness, which is the first step. But if we always have our head down, if we're always sprinting, we don't see. It's like if we were to drive down, if we were to walk down the street versus drive down the street. If we were to walk, we were to look around, we would see so much more. We would notice everything that was happening. Whereas you're driving, you might see, oh, there's a house. That house is blue. Okay, cool. But you miss out on so much of life. And there's a time for putting your head down and going fast, for sure. But that time is not a lifetime. And so most people have gotten really good at going fast. I would encourage people to go a little bit slower, to actually notice what their life is, who they're being in their life, the quality of their life, the quality of their relationships, the quality of their satisfaction with who they are and who they're becoming. That only happens when you really take a step back and become the observer. And to be the observer, you really have to slow down. And it's a practice. I catch myself in it all the time. Going into, boom, gotta do this. Jumping into unconscious patterns, jumping into just triggered eating, bored eating, whatever it is. And so, but every time, the first step before anything else is just to slow down. Take one breath. Take 3 breaths. One of my friends is an intuitive eating coach. He say every time you open the fridge, just take 3 breaths. And then check in whether or not you want to actually eat something or choose what you want to eat from that place rather than just the grab and bah. Or when you sit down for a meal, same thing. Or when you go into a conversation, slow down, take 3 breaths, check in with what you really want to say, with what place you want those words to come from. You want them to come from defense or protection? Do you want to come from your heart? And all of those examples all start with slowing down. So that's what I would say. Slow down, breathe.
There's so much power in slowing down. It actually, the theme I hear in all of that you were talking about is that it gives us choice again. We're no longer running on autopilot. We're no longer quickly trying to numb something out. We actually have a choice point. Doesn't mean we're going to choose the quote unquote healthy option or the best option for us every single time, but at least it gives us enough space to make a choice. Yeah.
And even when you don't, like when you choose the unhealthy habit, you're still choosing it rather than the lack of choice in doing it. So it's not, I always say it's not about the action. It's about the energy that's behind it. Are you consciously choosing this in your life? If the answer is yes, great. Doesn't matter what the act, like go do it. Yeah, if you're consciously choosing it. And so I name that all the time. It's like, yeah, I'll still go out for pizza. I went out for pizza with some guys last night, and I was like, all right, not the healthiest choice. Going out for full gluten pizza, not even gluten free. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to feel this tomorrow, and that's fine. And I'm still going to choose to do it. And I'm glad I did. But, yeah, it's still, we all have a choice. And I say all the time that it's a game of moments. And in this moment right now, you have a choice. And that moment goes, and then you have another moment. And that's the game. You get to choose in every moment. So if you made a quote unquote mistake, or you acted unconsciously, or you did something that maybe you weren't proud of, okay, now you have a choice in this moment. What do you do now? Do you keep playing out the old thing? Do you keep playing out the old story, keep buying into that old action? Or do you choose differently? Do you choose to maybe name some of those mistakes, to name some of those things that are shameful, and choose to take a different action, to communicate differently? And every moment we get that choice, every single moment, and we all have it. And so it doesn't matter what happened the moment before, you get a fresh choice right now.
Thank you for that. So if people were really interested in connecting more with you, your work, and maybe even consider working with you, how do they find you out there in the world?
Yeah, Chris Marhefka on Instagram is a good place to find me. And then chrismarhefka.com. And then also my company, trainingcampforthesoul.com and Training Camp for the Soul on Instagram. Those are best places.
Okay, great. I'll make sure to highlight those in the show notes so that people can easily access them. Is there any future work that you'd like to highlight that's coming up that people might want to keep an eye out for?
Ooh, yeah. I have the last virtual program that we're running for the year starts in September 9th. Not sure when the episode airs, but September 9th is our next virtual. And then we have a retreat for Training Camp for the Soul in October 27th. And then I'm going to be running another one of those men's retreats in December in Austin, Texas. So,
okay, great. Well, it gives people some dates and timelines to look at if they're really interested in working with you in the near future. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate being able to come from very different worlds and yet be able to find the common connections, to find the common humanity, to find our shared experience. It's so important in our world to be able to do that. It's so high conflict out there right now. It's so divided. And yet the connection is really a piece of what we really need. And so thank you for being a man that's willing to do that work, to be in different life experiences, but to also continue to look for the place where we connect and to look for the places where we are the same. Because there are plenty of those places where we're the same. It's really just easy to focus on some of the differences, but there are plenty of places where we are the same. So thank you for being one of those men. Yeah. If people want to connect with me, you can go to my website at travisstock.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Trevor03. That's where a lot of the continued conversations are going on about the new masculine in a live way. These episodes are static conversations, but we can continue having those conversations on Instagram. So follow me at Trevor03. I'm also on Patreon. You can, if you want to become a contributor and support the mission of the new masculine, you can go to patreon.com/thenewmasculine. Again, that's patreon.com/thenewmasculine. Thank you again so much, Chris, for joining me. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I wish you the best in your upcoming trainings that you're leading, and I look forward to future connections.
Thank you so much for having me on, Travis, and you're outstanding at what you do. So thank you for this platform to be able to share this and have this conversation. And I almost forgot. I also have a podcast called Fully Expressed. So if people want to hear more about me and some of the interviews that I do, and vulnerability, honesty, integrity, Fully Expressed.
Perfect. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. Thank you for the nice compliment, and it's been a real joy to connect with you today.
Yeah, you too.